The person with fewer options may sometimes improve faster than the one with unlimited access. We tend to believe expansion equals growth. Bigger city, better gym, wider arena, more reps. It feels intuitive. More inputs should mean more progress. But let me introduce you to a different possibility. Before we go any further, I want you to imagine something. Picture a small wooden box sitting on a table in front of you. It's locked. There's a question scratched into the lid, but we can't quite read it yet. The letters are worn down. What I can tell you is this. Whatever that question asks, the answer inside that box might determine whether you waste the next 5 years of your life or compress them into 6 months. We'll come back to it. Not yet. And somewhere on the underside of that box, there's something engraved. You can feel the grooves with your fingertip if you flip it over. Someone took the time to carve words into the wood, carefully, deliberately. What it says matters, but we're not reading it yet. Let me introduce you to a thought experiment. Imagine a soccer player. Let's call her Mara. Mara tears her ACL surgery, recovery, 6 months of no running, no contact, no field time. Her teammates are out there every day, scrimmaging, improving, building chemistry. She's sitting in a rehab facility with a foam roller and a resistance band. Now imagine someone hands her a virtual reality headset. It can't simulate running, can't simulate the impact of striking a ball, can't simulate the full body mechanics of a sliding tackle, but it can do one thing. It can simulate the angle of a kick, just the angle. She can see a virtual ball, adjust her foot position, watch where it goes. No power, no grass beneath her feet, no wind, just the angle. Here's the question most of us would ask. What's the point? And that question feels rational. It feels like realism. But let me suggest something. It might actually be an example of what psychologists call the nirvana fallacy, which is the tendency to compare a real available option not against doing nothing, but against some perfect ideal that doesn't currently exist. We don't compare the VR headset to lying in bed. We compare it to being back on the field, and because it falls short of the field, we dismiss it entirely. But what if Mara uses that headset for 3 hours a day, every day, for 6 months? What if she visualizes 10,000 kicks? What if, when she returns to the field, her angle precision is so deeply encoded that it surprises even her? This isn't hypothetical. There's a well-known study from the University of Chicago, conducted by Dr. Biasiotto, that looked at basketball free throws. 3 groups of participants were tested. One group practiced free throws physically for 20 days. Another group did nothing. And a third group never touched a basketball. They only visualized making free throws in their minds, spending 20 minutes a day imagining the arc, the release, the swish. The physical practice group improved by 24%. The group that did nothing didn't improve. And the mental-only group, the group that never once held a ball, improved by 23%. Nearly identical to the real thing. Let that sit for a moment. 20 minutes a day of lying still and imagining something can get you 96% of the way to actually doing it. So when we look at our training circumstances and say this isn't enough, we might want to reconsider what enough actually means. Because the gap between our limited practice and no practice at all might be far larger than the gap between our limited practice and the ideal version. Now let me stretch this further. Let's go somewhere fictional. In Ender's Game, Andrew Ender Wiggin is trained for leadership and combat through simulations. A battle room, zero gravity, teams, strategy. It's elaborate, immersive, engineered by the greatest military minds in human history to prepare him for war. But what if it wasn't? What if, instead of the battle room, Ender was locked in a concrete cell with a single object, a Game Boy, one game? Let's say it's Super Mario. Flat levels, Goombas, pipes, jump, run, time. That's it. Should he stop playing after 100 attempts, after 1000? Or should he keep going, trying to extract absolutely everything that simple system has to offer? Trying to understand timing on a level so granular that he can predict the exact frame a platform will crumble. Trying to find the invisible seams in the game's logic. Here's what I find interesting about this thought experiment. Most of us, if given the Game Boy, would feel cheated. We'd look at the battle room and say, that's real training. We'd look at the Game Boy and say, that's a toy. But the person who plays the Game Boy 10,000 times isn't just learning the game. They might be learning patience, pattern recognition, micro-timing, adaptation, the ability to fail 9,000 times without quitting. And those things transfer. That's the part we underestimate. Let me introduce you to a figure I'll call the prisoner mathematician. Imagine a person locked in a Soviet gulag in the 1940s. No paper, no pencils, they were confiscated, no textbooks, no colleagues, no chalkboard, just a concrete floor and a nail. This person scratches equations into the wall with that nail, day after day, working through problems from memory, inventing new notation because they can't remember the old notation precisely, solving things in their head that would normally require pages of written work, because pages don't exist here. And the real historical parallel isn't far off. Mathematicians and scientists imprisoned in the Soviet system, people like Nikolai Vavilov, who continued their intellectual work under impossible conditions, didn't just maintain their abilities. In some documented cases, the constraint of having to hold entire proofs in their minds to reconstruct frameworks from scratch seemed to deepen their conceptual understanding in ways that might not have occurred with unlimited resources. This mirrors something in cognitive science called desirable difficulty, a term coined by Robert Bjork at UCLA. The idea is counterintuitive. Making learning harder within certain bounds can actually make the learning stick more deeply. Spacing out practice, removing cues, forcing retrieval from memory rather than recognition. All of these things feel worse in the moment but produce stronger long-term retention. The prisoner mathematician's nail and wall aren't inferior tools. They might be, in a strange way, superior ones because they force a kind of engagement that a well-stocked office never would. Let's talk about something uncomfortable. If I told you, with full access to ideal conditions, your improvement speed will be 100%. And then I said, I'm sorry, but with what you currently have, your improvement speed is only 1%. Would you take it? Most of us wouldn't, and if we're honest about why, it's not because 1% is zero, it's because 1% feels unfair. But fairness isn't a training metric. Fairness is an emotional response, and responding to an emotional response as though it were a logical conclusion, that's something worth noticing. Psychologists might call this a form of effort discounting, where we unconsciously devalue outcomes that feel disproportionate to the effort required. If the ratio feels wrong, we opt out entirely. But think about that 1%. Over a year, compounded 1% daily improvement means you're 37 times better than where you started. That's not nothing. That's transformation, disguised as futility. And here's the thing, the situations we assume are 1% are often much more than that. Sometimes 10, sometimes 50. Sometimes, and this is the part that should unsettle us a little, the constraint doesn't just fail to slow you down, it makes you faster, more intense, more mindful, more obsessive, because you can't afford to waste a single repetition when repetitions are scarce. Remember the box and the engraving on the underside? Let's flip it over now. It reads, what did you do with what you had? Not, what did you have? Not, what could you have had? Not, was it fair? What did you do with what you had? There might be something uncomfortable about that question because it strips away every comparison, every excuse, every fantasy about a better starting position. It just asks you to account for the ground beneath your own feet. There's a trope in fiction that appears across cultures. The hero locked in a room, given almost nothing, and emerging transformed. In martial arts, cinema, it's the monk in solitary training. In mythology, it's the figure cast into the underworld who returns with forbidden knowledge. In real life, it looks like the athlete rehabbing in a small room, or the writer with nothing but a notebook, or the chess player studying alone with a single book of grandmaster games, playing through each one on a battered board until the patterns live inside their bones. The common thread isn't the room, it's what happens when the room is all you have. Because when external variety disappears, internal depth has to increase to fill the space. You can't go wide, so you're invited to go deep. And depth, it turns out, might be where mastery actually lives. Think about it this way. A person who practices in an elaborate facility with 100 different exercises and 30 different coaches might develop breadth. But a person in a room with one exercise and no coach might develop something else. An intimate, almost obsessive familiarity with every single variable in that one thing. They notice what the first person never will, because the first person never had to. Let's open the box now. The question scratched into the lid, the one we couldn't read before, it says, if your improvement ceiling were secretly higher than you assumed, would you have started sooner? And inside the box, there's a piece of paper. And what's written on it is simple. It's a number. And the number is the real percentage The actual improvement rate you could have achieved with the limited tools you already dismissed as inadequate. And here's the part that might keep you up tonight. It's not 1%, because the future of training, whether it comes through virtual reality or artificial intelligence or tools we haven't named yet, is going to keep offering us imperfect simulations, approximations, shadows of the real thing. And the people who thrive won't be the ones who waited for perfect conditions. They might be the ones who picked up the Gameboy in the cell and played it 10,000 times. So when you find yourself looking at your circumstances and thinking, this isn't enough, this isn't the real thing, I don't have what they have, maybe it's worth remembering. There's a box somewhere with your name on it and a question scratched into the lid.